Good afternoon, good morning, good evening for some of you. Welcome to the discussion panel on MVC versus Portal Engine. I'm Ryan Overton, and I'm your developer evangelist for Kentico Experience, and I'm joined today by 5 of our amazing Kentico Experience MVPs. Our first MVP is Brian McKeever.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you. Most of you have probably met me. Been doing this for a while. Co-owner at BizStream, custom software development shop in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Like Ryan said, experienced MVP for a few years now.
Great, thanks, Brian. Our next MVP is Trevor Fias.
Howdy, everyone. You probably know me from my various modules on GitHub and such, but I always focus on developer tools to help you guys make your sites easier. I'm glad to be part of this board, and hopefully we can help more developers out.
Awesome. Next, we have Sean G. Wright.
Hello, everyone. I'm a newer MVP. Only been an MVP for the past year. But the company I work for, a web development and marketing agency from Ohio, USA, named Wired Views, we've been doing Kentico since I think version 1.4. So we've been around the block for a while, hoping to talk about some cool MVC and .NET Core Kentico experience stuff today.
Oh yeah, I'm ready to hear some opinions on this. So we've got a couple more. Our next MVP is our only one from the land down under, Andy Thompson.
Hi everyone, I'm the token Australian MVP in the group. So I've been using Kentico as well for probably 12 years. I'm used to that being impressive, but now that Sean's mentioned he's been using it since version 1, that's pretty impressive. I'm humbled there. So I'm from a digital agency in Melbourne, Australia, down under. And I've rotated my video up the right way for everyone to make it a little less disorienting. Yeah, looking forward to having a chat about MVC and Portal Engine today.
And our last, but certainly not least MVP is Dimitri Bastron.
Hi guys, my name is Dmitry Bastron, and I'm a solution architect at UK-based agency called Delete. We have been working with Kentico for almost 5 years now, not so long as other guys, but still have built quite a few websites on Kentico, and very excited with the new release of Experience 13. So looking forward to discuss .NET Core versus Portal Engine stuff.
Awesome. For the past couple of versions, we've had the option to develop sites using one of 2 development models and technologies, Portal Engine and MVC. But with the release of Kentico Experience 13, Portal Engine's no more. It's MVC all the way. So to help our audience better understand why they would want to make the switch, other than the fact that it's the only option now, what benefit do you see MVC over Portal Engine? Let's start with Brian.
Sure, thanks Ryan. So there's actually quite a few benefits, and I'm going to let the other guys talk about the technical benefits because they're really, really good at that. I'm going to take it from a business perspective a little bit in terms of really making your team happy and your clients happy is the main benefit I see of being in modern architecture, which is what MVC and .NET Core and Experience 13 give us. You're going to be able to provide a platform for your projects that your developers are happy to work with. They're going to like it because they're going to be able to use the bleeding edge technologies that make up a modern .NET solution. They can use front-end stacks that they want to with React or Vue or Angular if they want to. It's going to just give them some ultimate flexibility. And at the end of the day, if you're a business owner at an agency like ours, or you're an end client, typically your teams will run a little bit more efficiently if they're happy with the work they're doing and provide better results. So by giving them the freedom to do the next technology, keeping them happy, you'll hopefully be able to retain talent, attract talent, and deliver faster. So, you know, the business standpoint is there. And then the second part of it is the way to build modern websites, you need to have control over everything that you do. And with MVC, you can do that at a greater level. And again, I'll let everybody talk about that. But, you know, things like accessibility and semantics, SEO optimized, mobile sites, progressive web apps, even it opens up all that flexibility when you move to this and you move away from web forms.
Thanks, Brian. Trevor, what are your thoughts on this?
And I'm, of course, coming from the guy that used to be all for Portal Engine. And now that I've kind of drank the Kool-Aid a little bit of the MVC world and the .NET Core world, I can tell you that the big differences and the big benefits I really found with working with the MVC is going to be really the speed and the fluidity of your development. Back in Portal Engine, you could do pretty much anything you wanted to as a wild west, but you also introduced a lot of different, like, oh, this something pushed, oh, that shouldn't have pushed, oh, now there's all these dependencies and all this other stuff, versus with the MVC core and MVC model in general, you can do better code practices. You're a little more controlled over your deployments. You can actually do deployments. We're using like DevOps and other tools versus like Portal Engine. Was not able to easily build and push and do all these other things. So it really has sped up not only made the development higher quality, more checks and stuff like that, but also just in terms of, again, performance. Portal Engine relied a lot on heavy caching and stuff to make it relatively fast, but even with that, it was hard to beat MVC speeds. So you got a much cleaner output, a lot faster of a site. And again, you could really do things in a much more code-centric fashion.
Thanks, Trevor. Sean, I know you've written quite a few articles on MVC, blog posts coming out on MVC. So what are your thoughts?
So there's a bunch of technical challenges that come with both building applications and sites on Portal Engine, and there are different ones with MVC. You typically do more development, more coding in MVC. This can be both a good and bad thing. It depends on how complex your site is. I've written a lot of blog posts about the technical aspects of architecture and using MVC to its fullest to build out a robust application. But recently I've begun focusing less on the technology, which is still important, but more on what MVC as a pattern with the platform enables us to do. And that's that with Portal Engine, when you would build out a site, you could build it very quickly because you could do everything within the portal. And what often happened is that you would create your content and then you'd create your design, and those things would get intertwined. They get intertwined throughout the site. And that made some things down the road more difficult. With MVC, you can still end up in that situation, but it gives us an opportunity to reevaluate how we design our sites. And it allows us to look at the site as a whole as two separate pieces. And this is how we deploy our MVC sites. There's the content management application and the content delivery application. And by forcing us to look at that separation of concerns with the site, I think MVC enables us to have a better idea of what our content should be and what the design and presentation of that content should be. So I think there's patterns and opportunities for developers, for teams that are managing Kentico experience sites to create a better finished product and to create something that is more maintainable over time by evaluating exactly what they want to have when it comes to their content and what they want to have when it comes to the design and presentation of that content.
Thanks, Sean. Andy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of those thoughts. The biggest one, I think Brian covered it really well. The key thing that pushed us towards it for a long time was the developers crying out for it, to be honest. The web forms technology that Portal was based on is aging. I'd also that's the point that I would probably make to decision makers is, sure, developers love it, but getting on the right technology now will just give you a longer shelf life for your project. The days of web forms are numbered, but MVC is absolutely here to stay. So you're not going to have to worry in 3-5 years or whatever if you're on the right technology. You are. The other one I would probably get in terms of a business decision-making factor is just the sheer performance improvements going from something like a Portal to MVC, and then next in this version that's just been released, the full .NET Core support. That might sound all like tech mumbo jumbo and it's just for the developers, but it simply translates to lower costs for your hosting and infrastructure. You can run the same website at a much higher capacity on a lower amount of resources on the server. So it's pretty, it's a no-brainer really. If you've got the checkbook and you're looking at which way to go, and the developers are happy to go either way, you should choose the cheaper way at higher quality. So it's a no-brainer in that. I'd also just say the one thing that pushed us, I keep saying what pushed us over, we only made the decision to go to MVC as of the last version, just previously. Some of the other guys in this group went MVC a bit earlier, I think. But the other thing that pushed us over the line was in it's 10, 11, MVC was fully supported, but it didn't have all of the features.
Andy, I think we lost your audio there.
Sorry, have you still got me? Yep. I think we might have lost you, Ryan. So the features that you didn't have in MVC before, we now have. In fact, some of the features have actually overtaken Portal because they had to rebuild them for MVC, and they rebuilt them in a better way. I think we'll talk about that a bit later when we talk about the experience of actually using it. So for me, as a business decision maker, it's a no-brainer.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. I apologize for that. Evidently, my internet started failing on me there as it came up and said, hey, internet's unstable. But hey, that's what you get with a live conference. And that should show you all that this is a live panel here. So let's go on. Dimitri.
Presentation.
Yes. Dimitri, what have you got?
Yeah, so the very first thing is I would like to say is that with MVC technology, you've got like a full control over your HTML markup, although it sounds too technical, but it makes your first of all, your UI developers happy. If they're asking for some particular things to implement, now you actually can do it and make it easier. Also, for UI developers, it's really important to use their own the tools they got used to use on their day-to-day job, and MVC with like code-first approach, it allows you to do this, and that's why without like amending, although guys mentioned that on Portal Engine, yes, you can go into Portal, amend your HTML markup directly on the in your browser, but you wouldn't be doing it that fast. With the modern tools, you will do it faster in code, release it faster, and make it more reliable. So that's one of the things, and I totally agree with Andy that running so when your website is running faster, it's obviously helps you to save the money on hosting, and you can run the higher website on the lower tier in Azure. That's absolutely fine. So it will save you some money for other purposes.
Great. Thank you, Dimitri. Now we've talked a lot about, developing sites with MVC over Portal Engine, deploying them. We've also talked a little bit about from the business side, but from a content editor's perspective, how different is managing a site in MVC versus Portal Engine? Trevor, let's start with you this time.
Sure. So the customer experience for between Portal and MVC really, to me, hasn't changed a whole lot. And in fact, it got a little bit better in terms of, we often would have issues where customers would try to like drag widgets and the UI would just go all sorts of wonky. And there's some speed issues and stuff. And most clients have noticed a little bit better UI interface with adding the widgets and stuff. Also, just in terms of how we build out sites, I mean, again, used to be just widgets everywhere widgets, everything's a widget. And now we started to kind of rein some of that back in and say, okay, let's think about what widgets are really going to be used and necessary, so it's less to maintain and those type of things. And for the most part, like, building out tools, not much of a difference. We built the Bootstrap layout tool, and now we have the Furl editor and a bunch of other things that are out there and available. And even in 13, there's a better way of doing widgets that you can use both a partial and a widget in the same code. So overall, I think customers haven't really balked at any difference. Only those that like were used to being able to go in and editing the template were like, hey, I can't do this anymore, and that might be a good thing.
Thanks, Trevor. Now, Sean, as you've been looking at it and working with it, what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think what Trevor mentioned, we've seen all those same benefits, and I think our clients that are using MVC have seen that the interface is a bit easier to use. I think one thing that's really interesting is with the way the page builder functions with page templates or sections or widgets. In the past, with Portal Engine, you might need a developer to create a new layout or template, right? Because there's a lot of HTML and stuff behind the scenes, and you would go in and you maybe would copy from an existing layout or template and make some modifications, but it was something that was technical. Whereas now with the page builder, I feel like creating new layouts and page designs is actually a lot easier, and it's a lot more flexible and a lot more powerful. So for a content editor, if they're going in and creating content, a lot of that's going to be the same, but the ability to create a dynamic website that sticks to consistent design patterns established by a development team, but use those pieces and parts and combine them, like compose them together in a new way. There's a lot that's been unlocked through MVC that I think some clients are seeing, but there's a bit of education that I think needs to happen there from the technical teams and from any of the people that are educating content managers on how to use Experience as a platform.
Thanks, Sean. Now, Andy, you've mentioned that your team has only been using MVC since the last version. What have you seen here recently? As we've started making that switch, as you started making that switch, as to the changes for the content editors.
Yeah, so I think first of all, I'd probably echo with what Trevor said, that it's not actually that different. I'd say don't panic. It's worth remembering that the admin backend is actually the same. They haven't overhauled that and they haven't rebuilt all that completely. What they have done is changed over some of just the page editing stuff. So the pages module will be a little bit different, but even then, it's very familiar. So I guess some of the key differences people will notice when they first go in is that there's no longer any page tab and form tab. And honestly, that's a little bit of a blessing for some of our customers because they used to get a little bit confused. Where do I edit my page? And it used to be, okay, I'm going to go to the page tab, and if I can't edit it there, I'll try the form tab. Developers understood why things are on different tabs, but now it's much simpler. You just go to content and edit your content. So that's actually been if anything, a positive change for some of our editors, simplifying it, a little bit less confusing. And I think probably other key thing people will notice is that you don't actually log into your website anymore. People used to often log into their live website and just put /admin on the end. Typically now you will log into a separate admin site. I don't know what you'll call it, but they'll have it might be something admin.something.com. But that can be a little bit confusing for people at the start, but trust me, it's actually a really good thing. It's actually a best practice where we're trying to push in old portal sites as well. It has some big benefits in terms of the performance and security. You don't want to be actually logging into your live site and slowing it down and opening up a login page to everyone on the internet anyway. So they're probably the main sort of three things that people will notice jumping across. But on the whole, if you're using marketing automation features or email marketing, contact management, analytics, all that sort of stuff, there'll be no difference. You just log in as usual, same as before.
Thanks, Andy. And I know that's probably a sigh of relief for a lot of people who are like, should we make that change or should we make that jump? So getting that external perspective, say, it's really not going to be that painful. It's really good. Dimitri, what have you seen from your side?
Yeah, so we have, during the last couple of years, we have released 3, if I'm not mistaken, websites developed with Kentico MVC. And what we're hearing from content editors that actually, so like Andy mentioned, that interface hasn't for other modules than pages hasn't changed that much, but actually what we're hearing from content editors, it's easier and like more straightforward. You don't have this design tab anymore. You're not confused with different. So previously it took me a while to explain what was the difference between web part and widget, how they are, how do they work together. Especially it's becoming a pain with multilingual websites. Content editors don't tend to understand the major difference between these things. So now everything's on your, like, you've got a page builder. You see everything in context. You've got only like a couple of places where you can actually populate the content, change the content, and there's a great feature with MVC page templates, which neatly integrated within this page builder, and you can easily swap the presentations of your page without jumping between the tabs. So Kentico UX teams are doing a great job looking and hearing the feedback. And what I encourage you to do also, like if you have any ideas, share with Kentico teams. They're really listening and reacting to these things. So content editors, I would say, really happy with the new interface.
Thank you, Dimitri. And also, folks, Dimitri's absolutely right. We want your feedback. We want you to tell us what you like and what you don't like. And we actually have a talk that's going to talk to you. That's going to go a little bit more into that. I believe it's on tomorrow's track, and just go in and check that out, folks. And they'll tell you how you can get that feedback to us. Brian, what have you seen?
Yeah, so from a content editor standpoint, I agree with these guys. I think the tactical day-to-day things we've talked about, it's not that different. 30 minutes into it and you're up and running on your own. But what I will tell you is the strategy should shift in your mind. And it's an opportunity when you move to MVC to think of your content model as a model of content where there are content types and they have relationships with other content types. And it opens up a new possibility of reusability where you truly can have a website where you edit something in one spot and the detail page updates, the homepage area updates, and the related article area updates, as long as you've developed that content model the right way. So I would encourage you to do an audit and inventory of your current setup. If you're in the portal engine, look at what you're using, look at what you're not using, and stop thinking about it as a hierarchy of pages, because the page menu item is gone. That is not in MVC. That's the one thing you do have to get over. And when you do that, you start thinking of it as, I have an article and I have maybe services or products or I don't know, industries that you serve, case studies about those industries, and think about how they relate and how they can be intertwined. And I was actually going through this with a client last week, and we opened up their eyes to, oh wait, there's actually a relationship between this case study and this insight that we didn't have on the old site. But now that we have a content model that shows that, we basically came up with a whole new way to show off their services in those industries that they specialize in. So I think it's important to think of the strategy as a content editor. It's not just pages within pages within pages. It's a content model, and using that is going to make your site even better.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And I'm going to plug, I think Sean's got a talk on content modeling, if I'm not mistaken, and that's happening tomorrow, I think. So make sure you go to that agenda and find Sean's talk and make sure you watch that. So I heard Trevor mention a little bit ago when we were talking earlier about, deployments. When we change technologies used in building our sites, we're also going to potentially change how our sites get deployed. And with that switch from Portal Engine to MVC, I can pretty much guarantee you that's going to change. So what are the deployment changes from Portal Engine to MVC? And Sean, it's your turn to go first.
Yeah, so it's definitely more complex. So I'll say that from the outset. There's no way to dress it up. You have two applications now, and you need to deploy both of those. They share a database, so there at least is that part. the state of the application is in one central location, and the two applications communicate through that. So when you are doing deployments, at least the initial one will be both applications, and you gotta coordinate. However, after you get the site launched, you're going to be making changes to the code base in different places for different purposes. So if you're making lots of, let's say, design changes, you're updating style sheets, you are changing your views, maybe adding new widgets. For the most part, you're only going to need to redeploy the content delivery application, the MVC app. And that's something that you didn't see before with Portal Engine, where you're making those changes. If you did make code changes, you are deploying the full site. So you would see an interruption in service for both the content managers and for people visiting your site. That will still potentially happen for people visiting your site with the content delivery application, depending on how you have, load balancing, or if you're using Azure app service slots or something. There's ways around this stuff, but the speed of the MVC application in coming back up is so much faster that I think it opens up the opportunity to have more of a continuous deployment model for your application, and you're making changes, throughout the day, and potentially deploying updates to your app multiple times a day. And I think that leads into an idea of continuous integration and continuous deployment, which, now that we're in this MVC world and moving with Experience 13 into potentially in a .NET Core world, setting up a continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline for your application, I think there's a great opportunity for that right now, and it will help reduce some of that complexity of having to deploy two separate applications, because a lot of that manual work is going to be handled for you if you set up these systems. And there's lots of places that you can do this. You can do it in GitHub. You can have your own, TeamCity server. You could use Azure DevOps. But tackling this problem at the outset when you're starting an MVC app, or if you have one, I think now is the time to start looking at that. I think it will bring a lot of benefits to your team.
Thank you, Sean. Andy, what have you seen when your team's been deploying these MVC sites versus the Portal Engine?
Well, the first thing we saw straight away was obviously you're deploying two applications now, as Sean said. That's going to give you a bit more upfront setup effort for your projects. But as Sean said, you're going to want to set up some pipelines that build and deploy this stuff automatically, or at least semi-automatically. And once you've done that, it's no big deal. And in fact, as Sean pointed to, often you don't actually need to deploy the whole thing anymore, which is actually a blessing. You can deploy much faster, but also, say if you're just deploying a slight design change, there might be literally no downtime. You're only deploying static files, which is fantastic. I'd also say, if there are any developers listening, another big benefit to separating out your application, we noticed, is that now your actual website code repository is so much smaller. It used to be hundreds and hundreds of megabytes with all of the Kentico admin files, and every time a developer was checking out or checking in or deploying, there were potentially thousands of files involved, especially if you're using continuous integration, and deployments could just take a long time, and it would take up a lot of space. Now you can have this tiny little lightweight presentation website, which can be pushed into source control. Code reviews are much easier, and it can be deployed in seconds to minutes for a quick change, which is absolutely fantastic. So I guess that would be the summary. Once you front load all that effort around your DevOps, it actually ends up being more lightweight and easy going forward.
Thanks, Andy. That's a good thing, a good reminder, is that, it may be a little more pain up front, but you're gonna take a lot of that pain away in the long run. So more painful up front, but gets easier as it goes. Dimitri, what have you seen?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with guys. So it takes a little bit of not catching up with your knowledge how to do these things, but in the long term, it's absolutely worth it. So And actually, all the websites are different. Some websites are front-end heavy, so they are design rich. They are have a lot of content on the website, and when you are developing things, you're more concentrated on content delivery part of the application. So it allows you to actually, if you open this project in Visual Studio, instead of waiting for a couple of minutes, what was happening before, it's lightning fast. So it's lighter application. You can change things easily. You can deploy things much faster. And the cold start of application is just literally 10, 20 seconds on the production website, so which is absolutely amazing. But there's another portion of the websites which are integration heavy, and like when you will be working on implementing another scheduled task or integration bus service or anything like this, you won't worry about amending the presentation of your website. And if you need to deploy things relevant to your integrations and scheduled tasks or anything like this, you will be deploying only content management application, which will be handling all that without affecting front-end website users. Also, it allows balancing the load between these applications, so offloading the stuff from presentation side, which shouldn't necessarily be happening there, like processing your marketing automation, content activities. So all your marketing activities which are heavy, which are processing behind the scenes, can be now scaled separately from the presentation of your website. And it allows you, it gives you a tool to scale things separately depending on your needs. And that's a really good thing.
Thanks, Dimitri. Now, you mentioned that a little bit at the beginning of, you start Visual Studio and then you have to wait. Well, that reminds me of when I actually used to develop code. I would start it up and then I would go get my coffee because of how long it took Visual Studio to actually load everything and load all the projects on some of these massive sites. That's what you had to do. It's kind of like that old that old cartoon where you see the two developers sword fencing, and the boss asks, "What are you doing?" "Well, we're building the code." It used to take forever to do that stuff, but this change in the way things are done, the way things are structured, has certainly increased that speed and that performance. Brian, what has been your experience?
So yeah, I'll answer it slightly differently, I guess. Everyone has been talking about the benefits of the separated applications and the code base and the CI/CD. You still have the database to worry about, right? So that hasn't changed a whole lot. You are still using content staging or import export or compare for Kentico to move changes from one environment to the next, or maybe Kentico CI in the development process. You still have that concern. So don't be fooled. That is still an issue with this. It is slightly easier and better now than it was today, but you'll always have that any SQL-based CMS. So I just want to make that clear. But my other point is, with the new Kentico Experience 13 build and the .NET Core support, you'll actually be able to deploy to Linux-based services, which for the business users in the room, that costs a heck of a lot less. If you're in web forms, if you're in Portal, or even if you're .NET 4.8, you're tied to a Windows-based system in Azure App Services or in AWS or whatever else. But by be able to go to Linux with MVC Core, there's some cost savings for that. So I think that's important to note too. Everything else has pretty much been said already.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. And I will say there's always two sides to the coin, and it's always great whenever you hear both sides, because a lot of times we only hear like the happy path side, the golden path side. It's all great, it's all rainbows, and you try it and it just doesn't work as you expected, because you're doing it maybe a little bit differently than somebody else. So it's always good to hear, these are still concerns you're going to need to worry about. And so I thank you, Brian, for helping us realize those as well. Trevor, what has been your experience for the deployment model?
So for us, I'll say that I'm actually a little bit different from Sean. It seems like things have gotten a lot simpler And I'll say it took us a while to get there. The reason being is that before we would do the Kentico site as a website versus a web application. So that was one issue, you just couldn't build it. But the other issue is that it was so large and clunky and massive. We've now fully integrated with DevOps, and all of our clients now can deploy any change we make with just a couple clicks of the button. So it took a while for us to get there. And I do plan on hopefully doing some video guides on how to set up DevOps and how to do one-click deployments. So that way people can see that quick transition. But it's been a lot easier for the code thing or code changes to just click and push. I mean, we have one client that took about 2 hours, and that was mostly configuration, but now he can deploy to his high availability environments with 3 clicks. Start, deploy here, deploy there, and you're done. So that's been nice. As Brian said, you still have staging issues. It's gotten better because now only content is really part of the staging. Like, you didn't have page template changes or web part changes or widget changes that are part of the database operations. So your database pushes have gotten a lot lighter, which has been nice. And overall, before where we were just doing git pulls, it's much cleaner to do the deployment. So that part I've appreciated. Once you get it set up properly, that's the hard part though, is figuring out your git strategy, figuring out your git ignore files, doing your build, setting up that, all that, like I said, is the difficult part of it. But yeah, once you have it, to me, it's gotten a lot easier.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's perfectly with any new technology, with any new framework or anything, there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve. I'll be honest, as a developer, that's actually where I have my most fun. I love going and exploring and checking out what is the, head out on that bleeding edge. What can I do? What are all the possibilities? And then I have to come back to reality and say, okay, well, we're really only going to do this pieces of it. But there is going to be a little bit for your developers and for everybody to learn in this process. Now, let's switch gears and talk about technology roadmap planning. If I've got a site already on Portal Engine, what should I do? Am I going to migrate to MVC? Do I wait for everything to be on .NET Core, the full .NET Core release of Kentico Experience? And when you all think about this, does your recommendation change if the current site is an enterprise scale site? Andy, we're going to start with you.
I have to go first on the really difficult question. So I think there's no one simple answer to this. I think if the question was not an existing site, if it was, I'm building a new site, what should I do? Then the answer is easy. Yeah, obviously MVC, and I would probably recommend go the .NET Core path as well. But the question isn't that. The question is, I've got an existing site and it's an enterprise level site. Now, we do face this a lot, and it's often less of a technology question because the technology wins for MVC and .NET Core. It's more of a budgeting and planning question. I often say it's similar to the question of should I upgrade my site or should I rebuild it, which people face every few years. I would say migrating to MVC from Portal is not going to be as bad as replatforming or completely rebuilding your site, but it is bigger job than a normal upgrade. So the triggers that we usually see if you're going through a redesign or if you've got big plans to rebuild a large section of your site or add a completely new section of your site. So if you're already going to be making big changes, then that's a really good time to look at whether you should migrate at the same time. The redesign is probably the biggest one because you're going to be rebuilding most of your pages anyway, which is the biggest change between MVC and Portal in terms of effort. If you're not doing that, if you don't have plans to make big design changes or adding huge features, and you have a lot of integrations in the background, which all enterprise sites do, I would probably consider staying. And I would ask your agency or your developers or something to estimate at a high level both paths, because Kentico will support you for another few years if you want to stay on Portal and upgrade through to the highest version that does support Portal, which is 12. The previous version. They will support you for a bit longer. You don't have to upgrade. And I'd remind you that just because the new version comes out that doesn't support Portal, it doesn't mean that your other Portal site will suddenly stop working.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye.
And as a developer, I have a little tear going in my eye because I want to be up there. I want to be on the latest and greatest. And I know in the back of my mind, I know that I need to think about the business side. Does it really make sense? So thank you for helping define those triggers. Dimitri, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would agree with Andy that if typically we are dealing with quite large websites, and if you already have a Portal Engine website which is like containing plenty of different features, thousands of pages, and big e-commerce shop, you need probably when you will be considering switching to MVC technology, you need to tie this to the time when you will be performing redesign or planning rebuild, which we see from our clients. Typically, each website has a like kind of 5-6 year life cycle, and then redesign and rebuild happens. Then I would say that if you are on the first part of this life cycle and you started with like Kentico 11 or even 12 on Portal Engine, that's fine. If the website is already live and running and giving you business benefits, Kentico's support model will support you for a couple of or a few years. So in the meantime, you would have this time frame to prepare for rebuild, and you should be looking at the MVC technologies anyway. So you will have this time to prepare properly. But if you are on the second part of this 5-6 years life cycle and you are closer to rebuild of your website, now is the time to consider using MVC for your new website build. And for those who are actually choosing between on MVC, we have with Kentico 13, with Kentico Experience 13, we've got actually two models, which is .NET classic .NET framework MVC5 and .NET Core MVC. So if you are choosing between these two, I would definitely say that go for .NET Core. Even though when you are transitioning from Portal Engine to MVC, that there's a huge gap and huge difference between these technologies. With MVC5 and .NET Core MVC, even though it's smaller, but there's still a gap. Those technologies are incompatible with each other, so you would need to rethink and redevelop certain parts of your website. So that's why if you're starting a new website and comparing, like, should I go with MVC5 or .NET Core MVC, definitely with .NET Core MVC, which will help you to future-proof your solution.
Great. Thank you, Dimitri. Now, Brian, I know, and I'm not going to try and have you reveal any spoilers because I know you have a talk coming up tomorrow on migrating a site. But what was your experience and what is your recommendation?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I do have a talk tomorrow about how I migrated my blog site at mcbeeve.com from Portal Engine to MVC Core. So hopefully you all can join that session and see in action on how it happened and what I recommend and some do's and don'ts. But I like to explain like this. Imagine your family car. It happens to be a 2012 Honda Odyssey. It's blue, tires aren't so great anymore, but it gets the kids to school and back all the time, no problem. It's a comfortable investment, it's a safe investment, and it does its job really, really well. And that may be oddly specific because that is the actual car that my wife drives my kids to school in. That's your Portal Engine site. All right, it's going to be around for a while. It's not going anywhere. As everyone has said, Kentico is still going to support it. And it does a great job. And it's a fantastic investment from a resale value standpoint. At least that's what they tell me, right? But over time, just like when you have your own cars and you decide like, okay, it's now 2020, we've had it for 8 years. Maybe we need to decide like, is it time that some things could start going wrong? Tires could get worse, the brakes could go, something mechanical happens, and it might be hard to find people who actually work on it because the parts are so old and they don't make them anymore. And maybe it's just, hey, we don't like the look of that car anymore. We want to think about what's our next vehicle. If you're at that spot in your decision, and that's different for every organization because a lot of things go into it. My personal belief is we'll just run the thing into the ground until it works great. Other people love having new cars every 2 years. That's totally up to you. And there are a lot of factors that go into it. But when you hit that factor and you decide, maybe we need to do something different, that would be the right time. And that new thing is your MVC core site. Think of it as like moving right to an electric hybrid, maybe even a Tesla. That is MVC core. And the potential and the power that it gives you are pretty impressive. And my wife would probably kill me if I said this, but I'd love to drive that car versus the 2012 Honda Odyssey. But it'll be up to you, especially in an enterprise world. There's a lot of moving parts. Things tend to move slow, a lot of security, PCI compliance, all the other things that may go into it. So if you can't jump right away to that new car and you do need to maybe have a small baby step approach to certain things, at least start building your integrations to third parties or your new features in other outside class libraries, maybe in .NET Standard that you can run in both the old world and the new world. And at least the new parts and pieces that you invest in this year and maybe next year will be much, much easier to port into MVC Core with Kentico Experience 13 or 14 by that time. And it won't be tied to the web forms layer. So you can take those baby steps now. And we're doing this with some clients who want some new integration with a new API. We're going to build it in a way that's reusable. And we have that in mind. Every feature we're building now, where the group is having the conversation, wait, am I doing this the right way that I can reuse it in the next phase of our Kentico Experience platform? So, but other than that, check out my session tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Now, your car analogy kind of hit home a little bit because my wife and I, when we upgraded our car back in 2019, we came to that same conclusion. We had the car paid off. It was, I think it was a 2010 Honda Pilot. Not an Odyssey this time, but we had it paid off. So that was the nice thing. But every month we were in the shop for one reason or another. Something was breaking every month. So it's like, well, I don't have that car payment anymore, but now it's all maintenance fees.
Yep.
And so we made the decision, let's just buy a new car. Let's just go out and we'll buy the new car, and it's under warranty now. So, it goes in the shop and it's paid for whatever breaks right now.
Mhm.
So that analogy really makes sense to me. Trevor, what are your thoughts on this roadmap planning?
So this, and I may have a little bit more to say just because of the experience we had with Kentico 12 MVC, which wasn't always sunshine and roses and rainbows. Luckily, Heartland, the company I work for, did a great job of letting me and the tools that we built be open and free for the community. Those that probably know, like I said, use some tools. Kentico 12 didn't have dynamic routing, so I created that tool. And a bunch of other ones. So going into now the new roadmap, a lot of the things that were missing in 12 have been added in for 13, which has been awesome. I will say that those who are new to .NET Core, especially if you're a portal engine type of guy, you might want to wait until some tools are created to make it a little bit easier to make that transition. That's something I'm really going to be focusing on. And again, Heartland Business Systems has been really good about letting me do that and give it to the community. So that might be one thing that might help you. We're going to make some videos and stuff to help you along that process. If you are familiar with .NET Core, then you're probably going to be miles ahead where I am right now, and be able to take off with this a lot quicker and easier. But in general, I would say that if you're looking to do new development, definitely want to do .NET Core and MVC. If you have an existing site, people said it here, move to Kentico 12 if it's quick and easy, and that way you're supported. And when you're ready to do the next site refresh, that's when you're going to want to rebuild. And whether or not to rebuild the website in 13 MVC.NET Core or wait until the next version with the admin, I'd say you're fine to go ahead and start building 13 and .NET Core, because that really shouldn't change too much in the next version. The backend is going to get an overhaul, and there might be new features that are going to come out. But us as a company, we're going to do all new development in .NET Core, MVC, and Kentico 13. And we're going to look for our Kentico 12 sites to do an upgrade, potentially maybe to 13, or wait for the next one, because we build it on such a way that it should be relatively easy to transition once those tools are created. So definitely keep an eye on my GitHub, and which is devtrev, github.com/devtrev, Kentico devtrev. And there should be some more tools on the marketplace that should help you in the transition from Portal to MVC. Shameless plug, sorry.
No worries, Trevor. Appreciate all the feedback and the insight that everyone's providing. Sean, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so I think what I can contribute best here is to summarize what's already been said. So yes, this is a business decision. It's going to be a business decision much more than it's going to be a technical one, because everyone's Portal Engine sites are working right now. So you, when they're working, you tend to go with what's functioning and making the company money. So what Dimitri said is correct. You're looking at windows of budget and when you typically have these cycles of rebuilds and things. Like what Andy said, a redesign of a site is a great opportunity to look at switching, because the big change between Portal Engine and MVC is the design side. It's the presentation side. The content management side is staying. It's there have been updates, there have been new features, but a lot of that stuff is the same. Definitely go and watch Brian's talk, because there isn't a lot of content out there right now about real world use cases of converting from Portal Engine to MVC, and he has one, and not even just MVC, but ASP.NET Core. So if you want to see what are some of the gotchas that you can run into, watch that talk, and I think you'll learn a lot. And just like Trevor said, right now there aren't so many people that have, or teams that have done this transition. So there aren't the tools, there aren't the resources out there. Potentially delaying for a bit and waiting to see what tools and tricks and ideas that MVPs or the bigger Kentico community comes up with, that there could be an advantage there. I think that, there'll be blog posts about doing a conversion and thoughts on what to watch out for. I know, watching Brian's talk, the idea of transitioning content from Portal Engine to MVC, pulling it out of some of those page templates or menu item page types, and getting it into more of a deconstructed content first approach to structuring your content tree. That there's work to be done there, and that's not just the technical dev presentation side or the design side. So yeah, there's definitely lots of things to consider here, and I think that looking to the everyone in the Kentico community and us all working together and contributing ideas to each other, and sharing that information about what our experience has been like doing these transitions, it will benefit everyone. So I'd say just get involved and keep your ear to the ground on what's going on.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And folks, Sean has a great blog post on DevNet about the resources, on where you can find all these different resources that I think you may have heard us mention a little bit, and how you can get involved. So make sure you go check that out on DevNet. Sean wrote it, so you should be able to find it there. But we're running, oh man, we've got about 7 minutes left. So guys, I want to give you 1 minute to give me your top takeaway of why people should be looking at MVC instead of Portal Engine. Dimitri, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so it's bleeding edge technology. It's lightning fast. It's ready and completely ready for you to use. So don't be afraid of new technologies. Start looking at it, start using it. And you may think about probably .NET Core technology isn't ready for full enterprise or big enterprises, or for my company. In fact, it's been like 3 or 4 years when since .NET Core was used in live environments. So go check it out and use it.
Thanks, Dimitri. Brian, what is your top takeaway?
Yeah, so I think if you had asked me that question 2 years ago, Ryan, that I would have had a much different answer. 2 years ago, a lot of the thought process around this was, oh, MVC makes it so I need to talk to a developer to do everything. There's no flexibility for marketers. This isn't going to work. How could we possibly do this? And while that may have had some truth to it 2 years ago, even though I would argue back against that, because that's kind of our history with MVC and Kentico experience, that is simply not true at all today. With Experience 13, with MVC page types or page templates, with the new page builder, the advanced A/B testing that comes with the platform, the preview engine that just works better, you can make highly dynamic sites that yes, a developer has to know about it one time to build you a little bit of a library, but once that library is built, you can make infinite combinations of that. As long as you have good, clean design principles, you can make something that's very flexible, very dynamic, but yet not have to talk to a developer every time.
Thanks, Brian. I agree with that. That definitely learn the patterns you should be using. And again, I'm going to plug Sean again, because I know he's been writing about this for since I can remember, since I've met him. He's been writing on patterns and practices. So make sure you please go check him out. Trevor, what are what's your top takeaway?
I mean, really, it's going to be, there's not much other choice. You can stay in Portal Engine and you'll be supported for a certain amount of time, but all the new developments, all the new features are going to be heading towards the new one. And the Kentico team has been working very hard at reintroducing all those features and things that you loved about Portal, balancing that out with which things shouldn't have been there originally, and putting in what's going to make it the best website, the best platform, and ultimately it's going to mean for a better end user experience and a better developer experience as well. So, head towards the future. There's no other choice. Don't look back. Let's go forward. That's my
That's
input.
right. Thanks, Trevor. That's right. Just keep going forward. If you remember, hindsight's 2020. So you're always going to find flaws or whatever, but make sure you use that learning and use it on the stuff you're going to now. Sean, what are your thoughts?
So we've been spending the past hour telling you about a bunch of new things that you need to do. And sometimes that can be pretty overwhelming. We're up here on this panel because we're all MVPs, and this is what we do. We, get cut up at the bleeding edge because we're either excited about this or we're running into these things at work all the time. But I would say don't get overwhelmed by all this stuff. Reach out to the community, ask questions, get involved, identify the things that you maybe have gaps in your knowledge about when it comes to all this new stuff. Is it MVC? Is it .NET Core? Is it CI/CD? Is it content management? Figure out the things that you feel like are going to be stumbling blocks for you, and then focus on those and ask questions. We have Slack that you can come and join and ask us questions. You can leave comments on blog posts. You can come to Kentico Connection. You can, there's lots of things that you can do to help you make this transition. I'd say, just don't get overwhelmed and good luck.
Thank you, Sean. And we're going to wrap up with Andy, our man down under. What have you got for us?
Thanks, Ryan. I'd say in my key takeaway is about the decision making, and if you're not sure whether to do it or not, I would say if you can't move your existing site, don't worry about it. Don't panic. You're not forced to, but if you can make the switch, I would say do it. It's definitely ready. Designers in your team will absolutely love it. Your developers will love it too, even if they have a little bit of a learning curve, but there's a chance they won't. And finally, it'll save you money on everything from your staffing costs ongoing through hosting, maintenance, future work, and whatever you build on it will have a longer shelf life. So there's a good chance your total cost of ownership will be lower by moving to the new technology.
Thanks, Andy. This has been a great time. I want to thank Brian, Trevor, Sean, Andy, and Dimitri for joining me today. I've had a blast hearing everyone's opinion on all these different topics. And on behalf of the panel and myself, thank you everyone for joining us today. And we hope you have a great rest of the conference. I think a few of us are going to be over in the lounge. So if you've got more questions, you want to know more information, join us over there or find us on any social media out there, Twitter, Slack, LinkedIn, YouTube. We're there. So someone from Kentico is there. So until then, folks, you have a great rest of your conference.
Thanks, everybody. See you in the lounge.
Cheers.
Agrees.